And at 10, Crying Child. Okay, so I'm putting this one at number 10 because I personally don't think that the Crying Child is a Springlock victim. To me, there's just no logical way that that animatronic jaw should have crushed his skull, because, you know, the Springlocks were already active and that would require a lot of power to crush a skull anyway. However, it is possible that since this is a series about haunted animatronics possessed by spirit metal, that logic kind of gets thrown out the window. So assuming that he is a Springlock victim, that's brutally scary. Being thrown into an animatronic's mouth and crying so much that you make the jaw snap onto your own skull, killing you instantly? Holy crap, that is nightmare fuel. That's why some people are scared of robots or animatronics, and while it may not be realistic, the possibility of it happening is still horrifying to say the least, especially since not even that long ago he lost his sister to Circus Baby, and that's pretty messed up. And I'm sure that Michael, who put the kid in his mouth, as long as, you know, I'm wrong about my theory, he'd be scarred for life, and I think I would be too. Before we move on to number 9, can you do me a favor and smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't yet if you are looking forward to this list. I saw a load of comments asking for it, so this better not flop. If it flops, so help me, you will all have a reckoning. The more likes we get, the more likely we are to do a part 2, and it also helps us against the algorithm almighty and lets us grow the channel, which means more cool vids for you, so you know, it's a win-win, so thank you. And at 9, The Twisted Ones. The Twisted Ones novel starts a year after The Silver Eyes ended, with Charlie in university. One day, however, Clay Burke comes to see Charlie, and for some reason brings her to see a corpse with familiar wounds. This could either be because she would recognize them, or because she was working with the police, or because they had to advance the plot. I don't know, I haven't read the original novels, but I want to. However, looking at the wounds, she confirms that they are in fact a Springlock failure, meaning that we have an unnamed Springlock victim in the Twisted Ones novel. If this character does have a name, like if it's revealed in later down the line or something, please let me know, because I couldn't find one online. However, while this may seem insignificant to you, the real horror of this number comes from what it signifies. This Springlock marks the return of William Afton, since at the same time, Clay also tells her that a blood sample they took from Afton showed that the body was a fake, or at least it was fake blood. The return of a killer, and the purple guy of all of them, that's pretty damn scary if you ask me. And it ain't The New Kid. Continuing with the theme of FNAF books, what about the story The New Kid from 1:35 AM, the third Fazbear Frights book? The story revolves around Devon, Mick, and Kelsey. Devon and Mick are outcasts. They aren't popular, they aren't cool, but when the new kid Kelsey arrives at their school, they make a new friend, despite Kelsey being charismatic and adored by everyone else in the school. Over time though, Devon grows jealous of Kelsey, since Kelsey has everything that Devon wants. So in an act of revenge or to gain control, because you know that's kind of serial killery, Devon hatches a plan to lure Kelsey to an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's to trap him in a Springlock suit for a couple hours, to try to humble him, I guess. But the plan goes horribly wrong. After getting in the suit, the Springlocks fail, as expected, because you know this is a FNAF book, causing Kelsey's blood to soak into the fur of the animatronic and pull around the ground. Devon and Mick leave Kelsey for dead so that they won't get in trouble, but something doesn't feel right. So a week later, Devon returns to make sure that Kelsey's body is still there, for some reason. He sticks his hand into the animatronic's mouth to feel if it's there, and snap! The Springlocks fail yet again, as per usual, and Devon gets his hand stuck inside the suit and bleeds out, but not before seeing a body in the suit, but with black hair instead of Kelsey's blonde hair. If that's not scary, then you need to go see a doctor, because that's bone chilling. That's messed up. No. And at 7, Michael Afton. This relies on heavy speculation and assumption. However, if the entered enema is truly what killed Michael's body, then could it be considered a spring locking? We don't really know if the Funtime animatronics have spring locks, but we can assume that they do thanks to their moving parts and abilities like a giant claw that goes out and stores items. But this would also mean that Ennard would have at least some of those same parts. So if the Funtime animatronics that were made around the same time as the original Springlock animatronics used similar parts or techniques, which is likely, that means that Michael Afton would also be a Springlock victim. We don't need solid proof since this is a possible Springlocking victims list, so proof of possibility is all I really need. And honestly, I think that this would provide a good explanation as to why he turned purple, since people who die don't turn purple. Instead, if they rot, they would most likely be depicted as green, especially when another major character is linked to the color purple. So, if that is indeed bruising, it would make sense if the Springlock mechanisms were hurting him from the inside out. And at 6, Bite of 87. The bite of 87 is such an infamous incident that I can already hear people groaning in the comments. However, what if the victim of the bite of 87, whoever that actually was a victim of a Springlock failure? It could make sense, since the animatronics had no harmful tendencies before this, so a Springlock failure is a reasonable assumption as to why someone got a frontal lobe removed. And a Springlock failure, assumingly, would definitely provide enough power to do that, since the Springlocks themselves would snap with such ferocity, and would probably circumvent the whole needing more power to do that thing. And if it was Jeremy, it would explain why the animatronics were suspended, because now one of their employees was bit and they had to promote him and fork over some extra cash to make sure that he didn't sue. So overall, whoever the bite of 87 victim is could definitely have been a Springlock victim. And at 4, Cassidy. Cassidy is the most mysterious victim in the missing children's incident. Her name was hidden for years, only really being discovered recently, and honestly we don't know too much about her. We don't know how she died, so the potential is there for her to be a Springlock victim. Maybe William knew that it would be easier that way. After all, she does possess Golden Freddy, who we figure was a Springlock suit that ended up having the guts removed, hence the slumped overness. However, if this was the case and Cassidy's body was in that suit, they would have found it when they were gutting him. But maybe William was the one who gutted it, considering how he was the suit technician. And I mean, like, to be fair, for a suit technician, he did miss a fatal flaw with the animatronics that he literally designed, since, you know, he got snapped when the suit was wet. Either way, Cassidy being a Springlock victim would help explain a lot in the series. Just, you know, the hallucinations and whatnot. And at 3, Am I Real? Am I Real, also known as Cake Bear, is presumably the primary and most recurrent antagonist in Dormitibus. Am I Real has 2 different forms. His first form is Cake Bear. Cake Bear's design originated from the Save Him minigame, where he delivered cake to children while a kid is murdered outside. He is the predecessor of both Fredbear and Freddy Fazbear. Cake Bear is a brown bear animatronic that also acts like a Springlock suit that appears in most of the main Nights. Although they do look similar, the only similarities he has to Freddy Fazbear in reality is that they both possess a top hat, are brown, have blue eyes, and are a bear. Am I Real's second form is a form that resembles Springtrap, however. This form has a green color much like Springtrap and contains human remains. His right eye socket has gotten bigger on the side and a big hole can be seen on the right side of his head. His top hat has received some withering on it as well, and his lower jaw is slanted and worn down, no longer circular like Cake Bear's. He also has a sizable hole in the right side of his torso, revealing organs. Ha, lovely. Rips and tears cover his arms, revealing more human remains. He also appears to be missing at least 1 finger on his right hand, and it's absolutely terrifying to look at. Of course, 3 out of 10 of these are going to be from Dormitibus. Like, what did you think was gonna happen? Did you watch the Dormitibus animatronics list? And ultimately, in at number 2, Springtrap. I believe we all know this story by now. Everything was going well at first. They couldn't pin him down and he was on his way to immortality. Once William discovered Remnant, however, he spiraled. He wanted to use it to fuel his life and make himself truly immortal. So in an effort to study it further, William lures possessed animatronics to the back room that they can't access and uses it to dismantle them, planning to melt down their endoskeletons to make soul-infused metal. However, by doing this, he unknowingly releases the souls of the victims he claimed oh so long ago. Shocked, he tries to scare them by getting into his spring body suit, which also coincidentally makes him feel more powerful. However, this haste coupled with the leaking in the back room causes the Springlocks to fail, crushing him in torturous agony for the next 30 years. However, he didn't die from this. As we learn in the Man in Room 1280, he was being kept alive by the spirit of another victim. So he was living that agonizing pain for 30 years, and that makes him damn well deserving of the number 2 spot. And before you ask, no, him and Garvey are 2 separate characters, meaning that they can both be included on this list. You're welcome. Finally, in at number 1, you. A spoiler alert for a fan game, and if I say which fan game, it's going to spoil it. So if you want to avoid spoilers, click away now. And thanks for watching. I'll give you a chance to do that now. Okay, now that you've prepared for spoilers, A Shadow Over Freddy's is a FNAF fan game created by Fiznam on GameJolt. It released on April 25th, 2018, and since it was made by the same guy who is currently working on FNAF Plus for the Fazbear Fanverse, you know it's bound to be good. The gameplay of A Shadow Over Freddy's is a hybrid between a traditional point-and-click game and a free-roaming horror game. The player wakes up to find themselves with no memories in a black and white abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and is tasked with surviving 5 nights and escaping the restaurant. The player is given a different task each night and must complete said task before 6 AM and without being attacked by any roaming animatronics. However, the ending of the game has you getting trapped in a Springlock suit and left to rot, meaning that you are a Springlock victim, which is probably the scariest victim of them all, cause I don't know about you, but I'd rather not get Springlocked. Although I know there are plenty of you that would just love that. You'd fill the suit with liquids that aren't blood, and that's messed up. Like, I'm not one for kink shaming, but yeah, there's kinks and then there's like being killed, you know? I don't know how else to put that. In at 10, shadow animatronics. One of the oldest theories is that the shadow animatronics are the first Springlock victims, and while they are from the main FNAF universe, this is a fan theory, so it counts. This comes to us after the FNAF 3 phone guide dialogue that mentioned multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures, which some interpreted as multiple Springlock suits failing at once, since the term Springlock in this situation is used to describe the suit as a whole, and instead of the individual Springlock mechanisms that are present within the suit. So the line of multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures could mean multiple of the Springlocks inside one suit failing at the same time, or more than one suit failing at the same time. This led some to theorize that previous employees were killed in the Springlock suits, which is where the shadow animatronics come from. This is supported by the fact that these shadows are of Freddy and Bonnie, the 2 animatronics that have Springlock versions, and while there are holes in this theory, this is, like, potentially the case. It's an idea at the very least. So yeah, shadow animatronics are fan Springlock victims because it's not confirmed. That's how I made it work. In at 9, Grim Fredbear. Grim Fredbear is one of the antagonists in Final Nights 3 Nightmares Awoken. He's only active on night 5 and is found by the left hallway. Grim Fredbear resembles the normal golden Fredbear, only with his suit glowing a deep purple color, while the interior of the suit glows a bright white. His upper face appears to be torn off, including his eyes, leaving an empty, hollow, gaping hole in its place, and the inside of the mask, though it appears like there is nothing inside, actually conceals a white, pale human head that can only be seen during the jump scare. And before you ask, yes, it's mine. I was going to make that a joke, but I actually wrote that into the script. Holy crap. This animatronic is clearly meant to be a reference to Shadow Freddy and the theory that the shadow animatronics are Springlock victims, which was confirmed to be false by Scott when he stated that William was a Springlock failure, but still, okay? On the museum level of Final Nights, which unlocks after night 5, it is revealed that Grim Fredbear is a Springlock victim, saying, quote, another Springlock failure victim, the 2nd generation of Fredbear. In at 8, Fred Trap. To be honest, I searched this up just for the hell of it, and there actually are Fredbear versions of Springtrap, which is kinda cool, but I mean, kind of expected. Fred Trap is exactly what you would expect. Springtrap's look on a yellow Freddy animatronic. The designs are actually really well made and honestly are scarier than normal Springtrap for me. I mean, I don't know, I guess for some reason I think bears are scarier than rabbits. Don't know why I would think that. But I think that Scott made William use the Spring Bonnie suit because of how scared Scott himself was of it, but that could also just be idle speculation. There's another theory that I have that maybe he was going to use the Fredbear animatronic, but then after his son got killed by it, he switched to Bonnie. There are also even more rundown versions and even scrap versions of Fred Trap, which are already haunting when you don't think about the fact that it would still be William inside the suit being kept alive by the spirit of his dead kid. Yeah, so Fredbear is definitely one of the more strangely unique versions that I've seen for this list, and you know what? I'm pretty damn impressed. These designs are pretty good. And at 6, Grim Chica. The first Springlock victim in the Final Nights series, Grim Chica is a primary antagonist in Final Nights 3 Nightmares Awoken. Unlike others, she is not a Reaper animatronic. Grim Chica holds a strong appearance to the Springlock suit on the poster in the Night 3 cutscene, but her faceplates are very hard to spot and she's almost entirely purple. She really resembles Toy Chica. The glowing accents inside of her resemble a human corpse. She lacks a bib unlike the original Chica, and her overall body is very slim like the original Toy Chica, except for her hips, which appear to be much wider. got the baby birth in hips. I regret that immediately. And she lacks shoulders or upper arms, with her forearms protruding from her armpits. Grim Chica is also revealed to be a Springlock victim in the museum level, saying, quote, "A victim of a Springlock failure, forever forced to haunt the suit she is wearing, now being manipulated by your sister and mother. Tried spray on tan, still very pale." Why is that so relatable to me? Like, no matter what I do, I'll always be pale and pasty. Not the whole being manipulated by your sister and mother thing. That's weird. But like, I'm okay with forever being pasty. However, I did rank this above Grim Foxy because like, it's Chica. And look what they did to my girl Chica. I'm sorry, Mommy Kentucky, for the transgressions. Halfway through in at number 5, Garvey. A psychopathic, cold-blooded killer. He stopped being human long ago. That's how Garvey is described in the extras of Dormitibus, the game from which he hails. Garvey is the penultimate antagonist of Dormitibus, and as a human, he was the man who murdered the missing children. He later went on to get trapped in Spring Bonnie, becoming Springtrap, and then was burnt to a permanent death in the Fazbear Frights fire. Garvey is a more gory version of Springtrap from FNAF 3. However, he is not William Afton, as the game was released before the name reveal, even before FNAF 4. Springtrap, but with hardly any exosuit or animatronic casing, whatever you want to call it. He crawls on all fours and uses his left hand as a foot and his left foot as a hand, like some demonic monkey from hell that Satan didn't sanction the creation of. Just look at this thing and tell me that it shouldn't be on this list. If you do, you'll be lying. And at 4, Golden Call. As a human, when alive, Golden Call's name was Kyle. However, he is now a Springlock victim stuck inside a Golden Freddy Springlock suit. Golden Call has the typical rundown Springlock suit vibe, similar to Springtrap. However, this is even more gruesome. His left ear is bent, he has guts coming out of basically every hole in his body, human eyes are hanging out of the animatronic's eye sockets. He's even missing exosuit on his right foot, and the character is holding a flesh-colored, at least it's flesh-colored, it may be even like fully like a flesh phone in his right hand that stays stuck to his head via more flesh or blood strands connecting to the side of his head. It's horrifying, dude. This is a monstrosity. And looking at his age on the wiki, Kyle was only 5 when he got Springlocked, which is absolutely nuts and just flat out horrible. So unfortunate, man. He was supposed to be the next best Fortnite player. That's a joke for the long-term subs. You know it. Getting close to the end at number 3, Reaper Spring Bonnie. Reaper Spring Bonnie, however, is the opposite of Stage Bonnie. This Reaper variant appears in Final Nights 3 and 4 and is an absolute monstrosity, but it's definitely more terrifying in Final Nights 4, so let's focus on that one. He is 100% the scariest animatronic in this series. In essence, Reaper Spring Bonnie is a nightmare Springtrap. He has sharp teeth and a very damaged and withered body. His suit is dark yellow in color. He sports a big purple bow tie on his upper chest, kind of like Glitch Trap. And then, like the other Reaper animatronics, Reaper Spring Bonnie has one pair of hollow, dark eyes that will steal your soul. I added that last part, but it's probably true. In Final Nights 4, his appearance is much more disfigured and gruesome, with sharper teeth, sharper claws, a different jaw, growths on his shoulders resembling fungi, and a kind of a gooier appearance overall. It's like the slime girl from YouTube if she made a FNAF character. He's also missing half of his right ear like Springtrap and FNAF 3, and his suit is more greenish in color this time around to be more like Springtrap. And oh my god, this thing is still terrifying, and it's more terrifying than Springtrap, okay? This is what Springtrap should have been. Or honestly, this is what I think like a Nightmare Springtrap would look like, okay? This is like a prototype Burn Trap in my eyes, or the way I'm thinking, like Melt Trap, the next iteration of Afton. And at 10, William Afton. Again, could William have suffered a Springlock failure before getting trapped in the Spring Bonnie suit like we see in FNAF 3? It's possible, and it certainly appears like that's the case in the FNAF novels, since William is described to have scars that are consistent with the Springlock failure before becoming Springtrap in the novels. So could it have happened in the games? Could William have been the reason the Springlock suits were retired? Since we hear of an unfortunate incident at the sister location, so is that unfortunate incident William? There are plenty of people it could be, but William having to deal with it would certainly get them put out of commission for a time. But with William continuing to use the suit and putting it on when the room was wet like we see in FNAF 3's cutscene, it suggests that that's probably unlikely, but it's still possible. So since this list is possible Springlock victims, I think he deserves to be on this list, at least at number 10, since can we really talk about Springlock victims without mentioning good old Willie Afton? Exactly. And at 9, Henry Emily. Now this is certainly an interesting case, because seemingly Henry has died multiple ways across FNAF canons, with his first apparent death being in FNAF World at the hands of Baby. His death in the novels seems to have happened before Silver Eyes starts, and then he dies in FNAF 6 along with everything else. But could one of these deaths involve the Springlock failure, or something having to do with Springlocks? I mean, maybe Afton offed Henry in one of these realities, or maybe Baby has some Springlock mechanisms inside her when she killed Henry. Hell, maybe Henry just climbed into the wrong suit at the wrong time. It's a question that we don't really pay attention to because, well, Henry's death doesn't mean much to the story, unfortunately, but it's still true. Henry dying doesn't really mean much to the overall FNAF lore, and we didn't even know he was alive until FNAF 6, so maybe for irony's sake, Scott had him bite the dust in a quicker way, rather than just, burning alive, because that sucks. Maybe he wanted to prevent himself from even more severe agony so that he didn't possess something. And at 8, Phone Guy. Phone Guy's death is one of the most mysterious deaths of all. We hear him die in FNAF 1 on night 4 with the sound of multiple animatronics banging on his doors, but we never really get an explanation as to what happens to him. We know he dies, but other than that, it's all speculation. One of the theories though is that animatronics got him and shoved him into a suit, resulting in a very painful death, especially since at this point the Springlock suits were either still in operation or hadn't been totally removed. The actual timeline of the events of the Springlock suits is a little messy since we don't really have years for things like them getting scrapped, yet it's still possible that Phone Guy was shoved into one or maybe used it to hide. After all, maybe Phone Guy is secretly William Afton and Scott just didn't want us to know that yet or something. I still feel like that might have been in the realm of possibility. Maybe not now, but it was. Getting close to the end in number 3, Kelsey. Kelsey is in essence the main antagonist of the Fazbear Fright story, the new kid from the third Fazbear Frights book 1:35 AM. Kelsey had just moved to town and ends up making friends with the protagonist Devin. Devin ends up getting jealous of how much everyone loves Kelsey, so he hatches a plan with his friend to trap him in a Springlock suit for a few hours. However, when they unleash their plan, the Springlock suit fails and kills Kelsey. At least, so they thought. Since a week later, Devin returns to make sure Kelsey is still there, for some reason, only to find a different body in the suit. He knows that it's someone else because the hair color's different, and then Devin gets stuck and bleeds out, only for the story to cut back to Kelsey meeting 2 more kids at his new school. This is an interesting story because while Kelsey did get Springlocked, he ended up being fine. So what happened? Some think that Kelsey is a ghost, while some think that he's the one you should not have killed, but no matter what, we all feel like there is a high possibility that Kelsey was a Springlock victim, at least when they were alive. We don't know how and we don't know when, but it's a definite possibility. And ultimately, in at number 2, missing children. Much like the Cassidy situation, the entirety of the missing children involved in the missing children's incident may have been Springlock victims. We're still unsure as to the method of extermination that William used on the screaming pests. Sorry, the kids who run around in my building hallways they're still getting to me. If they ever go missing though, these videos are not going to help me. Anyway, we don't know how William dispatched of these kids before shoving them into the suits, and honestly, there may not be a way that he killed them before shoving them in. The act of putting them in the suits may very well have been what killed them, which would make sense given that a Springlock incident would be more agonizing than a simple knife to the chest. And a Springlock collapse would be a more realistic way for the suits to start leaking blood and other fluids, since one knife wound wouldn't really do that, especially around their eyes. Even if the suits didn't snap closed, if William shoved them into the suits, that's close enough for me.